Welcome, everyone. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. If you're joining us, this is our very first special event webinar for May. It's called Best Practices for Successful Virtual Interior Design Meetings. And Rebecca West is our presenter, and she is going to open. Oh, by the way, she's from Seriously Happy Homes. She's from the West Coast, and I'm going to have her open up the session. Rebecca, if you're ready, we're ready to get started, and thanks so much.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, and to everybody who is listening, I'm so excited that we're sharing this time together. This is kind of a funny way to do this because we're going to be talking about virtual design meetings, but I'm not sure that any of you can actually see me. Luckily, there will be lots of screenshots, so I'm going to talk about what I'm showing you with screenshots so you can see what I mean. And then if we ever get the chance to meet in person via Zoom, you'll get to see me in practice with all the things we're talking about today. So virtual design meetings, obviously they are a thing now, and it's just like meeting in person, except for we know it's not, but it does have the benefits of zero travel time, no parking fees, and no germ sharing, which is of course the thing that is keeping us all at home right now and making us think about how we can have a more virtual design practice. So who am I? I'm Rebecca West. I'm CEO of a residential interior design firm called Seriously Happy Homes here in Seattle. I'm the author of a book called Happy Starts at Home, and I am also a business coach to my colleagues, residential interior designers who also have the goal of helping people get happy at home. What I'm really good at as a designer and coach is turning big things, big goals into actionable steps, and that's what I want to do today as we're talking about virtual meetings, make it just a little bit less scary, a little bit more accessible, and give you some good habits that will make you look as professional and expert in a virtual meeting as you do in a real life meeting. So we're here today to learn three main buckets of things. Number one, the best practices to use while you're having a virtual meeting so that your brand is elevated and you look as professional and expert as possible. Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of virtual meetings and find ways to mitigate the weaknesses so that they aren't as problematic. And then, of course, I want you to leave here a little bit more comfortable troubleshooting the technology with your clients, because in the role as expert, you need to be the expert kind of in everything. You can't be frazzled by a bad Wi-Fi connection or not being familiar with the technology. So I'm hoping at the end of this conversation, you feel all of these things have been covered. So let's talk about learning objective number one, and that is the best practices for virtual meetings that elevate your brand and make you look like the expert you are. First thing we've got to do is gather up the right gear for having a great virtual meeting. Number one, you're going to need some kind of a camera. Ideally, not on your phone, and there's some exceptions to the ideally not on phone. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Now, having a camera does not mean you have to go and buy an external camera. It really depends on the equipment that you already have in your hot little hands. This is me. This is me on my built-in camera on my MacBook Air. So I just use this for all of my virtual meetings. I have found that the quality is fantastic, and I don't need anything beyond this because I'm not trying to become some YouTube star. There are lots of different levels of camera quality in the various devices. And if you're not finding that you have the quality you want for looking as professional as you can, then you might try an external webcam. But like I said, I just use the built-in camera in my MacBook Air. Some people are concerned about the cameras on their computers versus their privacy, and so they will use a little piece of tape or a sticker to cover up the camera on their device. I do not recommend that because when you pull that sticker or piece of tape away, it can leave a film over your camera and make you look grainy or foggy or just not as professional as you could. So what I'm pointing at there in the screen is this little tiny slider camera cover that I got on Amazon. I got 6 of them for $10, so I was able to get one for me and one for my whole team. And you just stick it right to your computer. It slides closed when I'm not on a meeting and open when I'm on a meeting, and there's no risk of having film on your device camera. The reason we want to avoid using our phone for video calls is we tend to put them down on our desk. So they tend to be facing us from an unflattering angle. And then we also tend to move them around a lot or they'll fall over. So if we're trying to elevate our professionalism, it doesn't necessarily support us in that goal. It's also kind of a socially awkward angle. The only reason you would look at somebody down like this is if they were way shorter than you, which usually is a parent-child relationship. So we want, when we're having a virtual meeting, to have an equal relationship, something just like we would have in person. Also, using your phone is horrible for screen sharing. So if you're trying to share documents with your client, you don't want them on their phone, and you definitely shouldn't be in your phone. Use your phone in strategic ways, which I'll get to in just a second. If you do have to use your phone, make it better and use a tripod. I bought this $22, very inexpensive tripod on Amazon, and I use it if I do need to record myself on my phone, which I do for a lot of my online videos, because it's easier for me to take a video and then shoot it over to YouTube or shoot it onto Facebook. And then that lets me be at a human level instead of some weird angle. The phone is, however, great for home tours and virtual site visits. And a lot of times I actually like it if my client is on a phone for those initial consults or virtual design consults. But really, it's only going to work well if you know how to switch your camera from the front-facing camera to the rear-facing camera. And it's not always intuitive. It's going to depend on the app you're using for your video call. And I have had a lot of calls with clients where they don't ever change the camera, and instead they just turn the phone around, which has two problems. Number one, they can't see what they're showing me. And even if they do a good job showing me what they want to show me, or they'll just kind of like say, look behind me. I see them and the room behind them, but of course they're obscuring most of the room. But if they turn the camera away, now the microphone isn't facing them, it's facing the room they're showing me, and I can't hear them. These microphones are designed not to take in all the noise around us and just capture the person who's talking. So if they turn the camera away from me, they've also turned the microphone away from me and I can't hear them. So whether you're doing it or they're doing it, you want to know how to switch the camera from front facing to rear facing. In my case, I'm on a Samsung Android and I'm using Zoom. So when I'm having my call, there's no little switchy icon. I have to tap the screen and then you can see that I got a little switchy icon. I touched it and then it turned around and you could see my living room instead of me, but the microphone would still be facing me. It's exactly what we're wanting. Okay, so we talked about cameras. Next thing you're gonna need is good high-speed internet. In general, I recommend avoiding being in a cafe because the Wi-Fi is being used by so many people that it tends to be really spotty. Not to mention, it tends to be a noisy environment, and that's not great for your brand and professionalism on a virtual call anyway. And then you need a quiet room. Ideally, you're going to use earbuds with an integrated microphone. It's optional, but it's recommended because the more we can direct the sound of our voice, the less echo there's going to be, and there's going to be less potential for noise from people or objects or cats or dogs around us. It doesn't have to be expensive. What I'm talking to you on right now are $15 earbuds with an integrated microphone from Amazon. I got them because they're pink, and then it turned out they had decent audio quality, so that was a bonus for me. Then you're going to need to explore your hosting options. There's Zoom, there's Skype, there's Google Meet, there's GoToMeeting, there's Facebook Messenger Rooms. I'm sure there's others. They're pretty much all the same if you're having a one-to-one meeting. You can just pick whichever platform you like. Most of them have a free option. All of them have paid options. The paid options usually start to matter if you're hosting events for large groups. Now, I'm used to using Zoom, and on Zoom, one-to-one meetings have unlimited talk time. You can go for as long as you want, but as soon as you have 3 or more people, you're going to be limited to a 40-minute meeting on the free plan. Now, you can use the same link and log right back into your meeting, no problem, or you can pay and go for as long as you like. Note that 3 or more people doesn't mean 3 or more people. It's 3 or more people logged in. So if somebody were having tech difficulties and they logged in on their computer for video, but they ended up calling in from their phone for audio, then now you have 3 users, and Zoom will see that as 3 people and will limit you to a 40-minute meeting. They aren't doing all the same limiting during this coronavirus time, so you might find that you get away with a longer meeting with more people, but you should plan to know that there's going to be a warning at 40 minutes. Okay, then you got to set the scene, right? We are interior designers, so whatever is around us and behind us, whether people do it consciously or subconsciously, they're going to be judging us. Separate from that, it also should be a non-distracting environment because you don't want people paying attention to what's behind you. You want them paying attention to you and what you're sharing with them. So make sure your background is non-distracting and on brand. You can, if you don't have a great background, you can play with some of the virtual backgrounds that are out there. There's a link on this slide that is where the two backgrounds in this image are from. So you can see one looks like a room, one looks like a crazy laser show. It works well if your computer will support it and if your app will support it. Not all the apps offer virtual backgrounds. In my case, my computer won't support it. And so if I try a virtual background, it looks like I'm floating in that virtual background. The other thing is you don't want to get too cute with your virtual backgrounds. You want to go back to the idea of being on brand. Now, if you're a super quirky, edgy, out-of-the-box designer, being in space could be perfect and on brand for you, but you just want to make sure that the experience your clients are having is cohesive with the entire brand you're trying to create with and for them. Also, in some apps, there is a blur feature available, so you could be anywhere and have your kids running behind you, and it won't be that distracting, aside from noise maybe. And that's a great feature if you're on an app that allows for it. So you've got a background that works for you. The next, and maybe even more important thing, is your lighting. It needs to be in front of you, not behind you. I cannot stress this enough. I cannot tell you how many calls I've been on with my fellow interior designers, and it looks like they're in the witness protection program or being interrogated in the CIA. So avoid being backlit. It doesn't matter how cute that background is outside your window. That's all we're going to be able to see. We're not going to get a nice crisp view of you. Instead, you want to make sure you are lit from the front. There is a fantastic video that I found the other day when I was getting ready for this. This lovely gal, Bobby, does this video called Cheap Ways to Look Great on Video Calls. And her entire YouTube channel is for women over 50 and for looking fantastic. She's super relatable, super personable. If you want to dive a little bit more into looking great on video calls, I highly recommend this video. Okay, so you got a great background, you've got good lighting, and then we already touched on audio, making sure that you're in a quiet space and you have some kind of a headset that will keep your voice pleasant instead of echoey. And ideally, you'll be in a room that doesn't have a ton of hard surfaces. This is why podcasters will often record from their closet, because all of those clothes dampen the possibility of any echo and they get better audio quality. Now, if you're having a virtual meeting with a camera, you probably don't want to do that from your closet, but just think about the office space that you're working from, and if you need to add some soft elements, some rugs, some curtains, some plants, go ahead and do it. And then the last part of setting the scene is being thoughtful about your camera position. I already touched on this a little bit when I was saying don't use your phone because it'll give you that weird up nose angle, but it's really important to think about your camera position. So you would not have a conversation in person with somebody like this, so try not to do it when you're having a virtual meeting either. You also want to think about how close you're sitting to the camera. You want to sit close, but not too close. This person that I was conferencing with was sitting really far away, and so really all that negative space is about the scene behind her, and I keep looking past her. Plus, it feels like she's not as engaged with me in the call, even if she actually is. We don't want to give that impression to our clients, so make sure that you're filling the screen, but make sure you're not too close to the screen. Same reason as before, you wouldn't sit that close to somebody in real. If you're having trouble reading your screen, either increase the font size or get better glasses. Because that's usually when I see it, is when people are trying to look into their screen and read what's on their screen, and then they get really weirdly close to that camera. Also, try to look at the camera as much as you can. It can be really tough. And two tricks to this is on many apps, you can actually move where the little head bubble is of the person that you're talking to. If I have my little head bubble over to the far right or left or down below, then you can see from my call out, this is me looking at that from my computer, I look like I'm looking off to the side. If I just move her little head bubble to the middle, then it looks like I'm actually looking at her, even at the camera, even though I'm actually looking at her face, which is just below the camera. This one is not as important because we're all really used to people looking kind of off camera during these video calls. But if you want to really engage with your client, the more you can look directly into the camera, the better it's going to be. Oh, one more tip on that. You notice also that I don't see myself on the screen. You can, in most apps, hide your self view. And a lot of us, I am definitely guilty, will stare at ourselves when we're having a video conference, just, checking our face, wondering if our hair is doing something stupid. So if you're distracted by yourself, try hiding the self view. All right, so the goal, of course, is to create a professional, pleasant, productive client experience so that nothing you're doing is taking away from the information that you're trying to collect or provide. Learning objective number 2, figuring out the strengths and weaknesses of virtual meetings and trying to mitigate those weaknesses so they aren't a problem in your goals. Pros of having a virtual meeting, you already know them, right? No traffic. Meetings actually tend to be shorter than they are in person, plus you don't have the travel time to get there in the first place. You can work with anyone, anywhere, which gives you the opportunity to expand your practice. And it's definitely easier for quick check-ins, especially with contractors for a site visit if they just have a question for you. Cons, obviously, color matching can be really tough. Not only is the lighting in your space different from the lighting in your client's space, but you have no idea what their screen is doing to what you're showing. Technical difficulties, bad Wi-Fi is a thing. Just know that it will happen. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. And just don't let it fluster you. Have some backup plans. And it's just not as personal. Everybody who's been living on Zoom like I have the last 6 weeks is probably in a Zoom coma. And there's something different about having somebody in person with you. You kind of feed off each other's body language and energy, and you can't do that with a virtual meeting. And it's just the truth, right? The cons are just true. So how are we going to mitigate some of these problems? I find that virtual meetings are best for initial consults, site visits and check-ins with contractors, online shopping, collaborative layout work, and definitely presenting layouts and electronic files. But as I mentioned, it's harder, but not impossible for color consults. I've done quite a number of successful color consults. I just tend to give a few more color options than I would in person so that they can then evaluate those colors on site. Sharing textural items is obviously hard because you can't hand them something and let them pet it. And sit tests, obviously, not real easy when you're on a virtual meeting. So let's talk about overcoming the weaknesses so that they are as little of an obstacle as possible. Number 1, top of mind, tech issues. What you want to do is, number 1, send your clients a how-to guide for your preferred platform. The more you can prepare them for using your preferred platform, the better your meeting is likely to go. And this is what my web designer sends ahead of a virtual meeting. She says in the confirmation email, please join Zoom prior to our session. Make sure you're on a desktop or laptop computer, have a stable internet connection, in a distraction-free environment. So you can see she's touching on all the same things I touched on earlier, and in particular, being on a desktop or laptop computer, because she will be sharing files with me when we're working together, and she wants to make sure that I can see them easily. And if you would like to get my pre-virtual meeting client checklist, I am happy to give that to you. Just email me at rebecca@seriouslyhappy.com. Okay, going back to tech issues, the next thing to do to mitigate those weaknesses, exchange phone numbers. I will not ever book a meeting virtually if I don't have their phone number and if I haven't given them my phone number. And it doesn't happen all the time, but if somebody is 5-6 minutes late to the meeting, I will absolutely call them and say, hey, did you forget we're having our meeting, or are you having trouble connecting? Usually they're having just a little bit of trouble connecting, or they lost the link, or their cat threw up and they're trying to clean it up, like who knows. But you don't want to sit there wondering if you should sign off when they're actually planning to meet with you. Have a backup platform. So maybe your preferred platform is Zoom, like mine is, but not all tech is going to work all the time. So get familiar with a secondary platform, Skype or Facebook meeting rooms or whatever. And then I recommend sending any files ahead of time that you're going to be going over with them as a PDF. You don't have to send it a long time ahead of the meeting. You might not want them poring over those files without your guidance. But if they have the PDF and the worst happens and you have to meet by phone, you can say, okay, we're on page 1, look in the top right corner, you can see that I da-da-da-da-da-da. Please do send them as a PDF. You do not need whatever you formatted or whatever fun fonts you used on your Word doc or your Pages doc showing up differently when they open it on their computer. So use that PDF function. Another weakness, of course, is, like I said, it's not in person. You can't hand somebody a piece of tile or fabric swatch to pet. So consider mailing samples or swatches directly to your client ahead of the meeting if you're doing a presentation meeting. Also, practice guiding with your words. You're going to, especially if you're on a house tour with them for an initial consult, get used to saying, oh, can you turn the camera back to your left, figure out what their left is versus your left, or can you point back towards the third window, the furthest window from you, right? Just practice using your words so they're as specific as possible and you don't get into a, wait, what did she mean? Which way am I supposed to point the camera? Because when the camera starts moving around really, really quickly, that can really mess with the Wi-Fi feed and slow down that virtual meeting and create audio and visual challenges. Follow those earlier best practices I talked about, especially the lighting, right? You want to make sure that they're having as in-person as an experience with you as possible. And set your own rules. So there are limitations to what you're going to be able to do relying on your clients for information, especially if you're asking them for measurements. So you can, for example, as a virtual designer, say, I will choose all of your elements, I'll choose all your fixtures, I'm going to put a whole color package together, but I'm not going to do 2-scale layouts for your kitchen. I'm going to let you and the cabinet maker work that out. Or you can do a conceptual layout that is more or less to the shape of the kitchen, but again, you'll let the cabinet maker work out the fine details of that. You get to set the rules for how you're going to engage as a virtual designer, and they can be slightly different for how you engage as a in-person designer. By the way, at the end of this set of slides, I did 2 videos on helping my clients take measurements to send me for a virtual design project, and you can access those on my blog. I'll give you a link to that at the end. And then get familiar with digital layout tools so that you can make instant changes while on the virtual meeting with your client. So if you are used to hand drawing, you might want to get used to using an online tool for layouts because, well, you're going to be online. And then the fact that it's not personal. It's not, like I said, not as personal. You aren't going to have the energy. You're not going to have the same body language. You're not going to be laughing at the same thing in the same room. But you can find other ways to connect with your client. So during your process, maybe mail them cards or surprise gifts throughout your process. When you start with them, wouldn't it be lovely for them to get a real letter in the mail that just says, I'm so excited to work with you. And maybe halfway through you say, oh, we're embarking on the remodel and this is stressful. Here's a lovely candle to make your home a little bit more pleasant and happy while you're going through this. So use the other tools aside from the virtual ones. And bonus strength, virtual meetings can be recorded, but should you record the meeting? And the answer is maybe. Recordings are great because they're an accurate note-taking system. You can let the client review, if you send them the recording afterwards, it lets the client review the information later. It's really great because it will remind them why you designed what you designed in your own words. And that can help you keep your vision clear when they share the design file with family and friends later when you're not around to explain the design decisions. And I have heard from a lot of my design coaching colleagues how frustrated they get when they have a wonderful meeting with a client and then a couple days later they say, oh yeah, but my mom doesn't think that this, that, or the other thing that you designed in my bathroom is a good idea, and you just want to tear your hair out. Well, if your presentation was actually recorded, they can share the recording and mom can be on board with your thinking because they heard it from your voice as well. But the thing is, there are rules to recordings and you are not allowed to record with somebody without their knowledge and consent. Now, most of the apps, if you push the record button, are going to alert everybody who's on that recording that they're now being recorded. But let's say you were doing just a screenshot recording that wouldn't necessarily let them know that that's happening. You can't do that. So make sure that you have some way of saying, hey, I'm recording this session so that they don't get mad at you later. All right, learning objective number 3, recognizing and becoming more comfortable with troubleshooting virtual meeting technology with your clients because you are going to have to troubleshoot. There are going to be problems, but don't let it freak you out. So first, let's talk about what you can do to avoid tech troubles in the first place. We've talked about a lot of these things already because they're really just good best practices. Number one, always exchange phone numbers. You want to have a way to get a hold of somebody that doesn't rely on Wi-Fi or your platform. Number two, send a how-to guide, which includes best practices. You want them to be in as good a meeting situation as possible, as well as you. So like my web designer, she says, please be on a desktop. If she didn't tell me that and I wasn't used to being in virtual meetings, I might not know to do that. So give them the tools they need to be the best client they can be for you. Have a backup plan, have a backup platform, use the next one, send the PDF files ahead of time, right? So the backup plan is not just having a backup platform, but it's also being able to have that meeting by phone if possible. Practice your system, right? A lot of the pre-virtual meeting jitters you'll have, you can get rid of by practicing your system first. I've never actually been on WebEx before this conference today, so I made sure to get on the system and figure out the tools and tricks of this particular platform because each one is different, and I wanted to be as professional as possible for all of you. So do that for your clients as well. Practice your words. You can't just go stand by the window and say, oh, well, if you put your curtains this high, then they will be fantastic, because you can't gesture in their room. So find a way, think about the things you're going to need to tell somebody and communicate to them that you would normally use gestures for, and figure out how you would say instead of indicate those same things. Have great Wi-Fi, and that is not something you can always control. I have had meetings where the Wi-Fi on my client side or my coaching client side was, well, I mean, honestly, sometimes it was just not working. So there's a couple ways you can troubleshoot Wi-Fi in the moment. Turning on and off your video and their video can help. I don't know why, but it just kind of loosens up the system, and it can get you back to having a good meeting and get things unstuck. I have not found the same to be true with muting and unmuting. I don't think it's as much data going through the system, but turning on and off my video has gotten me unstuck a couple of times when I've needed to do that. Moving closer to your router or getting router extensions in your house so that the Wi-Fi is as close to where your device is as possible, and making sure that your entire family isn't also using the Wi-Fi when you're trying to use it. So maybe asking the kids to pause their Fortnite games and strategizing with your husband or your wife about when they're going to take their Zoom call. And then know the most common issues so you stay calm, right? That's the most important thing. If you stay calm, if you aren't frazzled, if you look like everything's under control, your client will take a cue from that too, and they will stay calmer and they will troubleshoot with you. Like I said, the most common tech troubles I run into are audio. I don't know if I said that yet, but I'm saying it now. So the most common tech troubles I find are audio. Sometimes, most often, they haven't set their computer permissions to allow it. Sometimes the computer is on mute or the volume is turned down low and they don't realize it. And sometimes they're in a noisy environment, and so all of the noise around them is competing with their voice. Also, as I mentioned earlier, if they're trying to share their room with you on their phone, but they haven't figured out how to turn their phone camera from front-facing to rear-facing, then you may not be able to hear them because the microphone on their phone is facing the wrong direction. And then the other thing that can happen with audio is that two people are logging in from the same room on two different devices. It always cracks me up when people do this, but I've had it happen twice in just the last 2 weeks. And you're going to get some horrible feedback. That horrible microphone screechy noise will happen when you have two people logging in from the same room on two devices. So you'll either need to say, hey guys, can you mute one of the devices so that you're only getting video? Like maybe they want to screen share on one, they want to use the other one to give you a tour. Totally fine, but you need to make sure audio is only going through one of them and only coming from one of them. Or ask one of them to go to a different room during our conference call. Visual is obviously the next most common tech trouble. Usually they just haven't turned on the camera or uncovered their camera if they're the kind of people who put some tape over it. More often they haven't set those permissions to allow it. This little graphic is the kind of thing that'll come up on your phone or computer if you're device, or excuse me, your app isn't able to communicate with your computer because your privacy isn't allowing it. And sometimes they don't have a camera. Now, hopefully you're going to know that before you would actually set up a virtual meeting with them. But, everybody's new to this stuff, and they may not realize that they need a camera. And maybe they have one on their phone, but you asked them to meet on their desktop or laptop so you could share files, and they didn't realize that you were also going to want to see them. Having said that, if you're just trying to share files with them, I suppose you don't really need to see them. Maybe them seeing you or them just seeing your screen is enough. So just think through, what are you trying to accomplish with this particular meeting? What tools do they and you need to use and have to accomplish it? And then communicate that to them as well as to yourself. And Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi. You can't control it. It's gonna happen. And you can have great Wi-Fi one day and crappy Wi-Fi the next day or 12 minutes later. This is why you send the PDF. This is why you get phone numbers. This is why you just accept that this is part of the new reality and you don't get frazzled. And then there's interruptions, and they are a real thing. And this is true on your side as well as their side. No matter how well you prepare, life can get in the way, especially while we're working from home, and lots of things can interrupt the meeting you are trying to have. You have to decide as you're going along in the meeting if they are really derailing the meeting and if you should reschedule. It's still your time, and it's still their time, and time is a very precious commodity. So if this meeting is going sideways because of Wi-Fi or because of interruptions or because one of the decision makers can't be there because something came up, you have to make a judgment call in the moment. Would it be better to reschedule? Remember, you're the expert. And that doesn't just mean the design expert. It means you're the professional in the room. You're the business owner. So you need to set the standards for what's going to happen with every moment. They're looking to you to be the professional in every way, looking to you to be the leader in every way. So keep calm, because we got this. Remember that most of the issues can be avoided with a good prep sheet or video for your client and a good backup plan. And like I said, that phone number. And as I keep saying over and over again, have patience, normalize any problems you might be having, and don't get flustered, because that will make sure that you're setting the tone properly. And that actually went faster than I expected. I think I might have been talking kind of quickly, but those are the best practices for virtual meetings that will elevate your brand and professionalism. Those are the strengths and weaknesses of virtual design meetings. You want to make sure that you're mitigating the weaknesses as much as possible. And I hope that that makes you more comfortable and confident about troubleshooting, remembering that there will be tech problems, but you have what it takes to address them. What we're going to do now is go into question and answer time so that we can deal with problems that you may have had when you're trying to have virtual meetings, anything that you've tried to troubleshoot with your own equipment and has been a problem, or just what's on your mind with the idea of moving from having a in-person practice to having a virtual practice. You can ask me really anything about marketing for it, about hosting the meetings, anything that's on your mind, because there's a lot that goes into having a successful virtual design practice. And remember, it's not just that you're going to want to have a virtual design practice, but while we're at the stay-at-home mode of life right now, even if you don't intend to move to a virtual practice right now, in order to have any kind of meetings with our clients, we have to have our virtual meetings. If you're going to want more, like I said, you can email me for my pre-virtual meeting client checklist. I'm happy to send that to you. You can find the how to measure videos that I created for my virtual clients on my blog. The link is here and it's on my site, seriouslyhappy.com. And I love making new friends, so we can be friends on Instagram at @BeSeriouslyHappy. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Debbie so that she can let me know what questions there might be from everybody attending.
Well, thanks so much, Rebecca. That was really great. And I know there were a couple comments coming in that said that you went a little fast, but that's okay. There's a lot of information to cover here. So let me get started with some of the questions that I've been pulling. So this question has been asked many times by people here today. So how do you ensure that clients do not steal your designs in terms of screenshots from a virtual meeting, etc.?
Oh, that was a great question, and I think it's going to come down to what you mean by steal. And the first thing that comes up to my mind is you shouldn't be doing any design work without getting paid. So when I do a virtual design, my clients pay half the design fee up front, and then they pay the other half the design fee when I do my first presentation. And that first presentation is a fairly thoroughly done design, so they could technically take it and run with it, but they're not going to have all the details on that initial presentation that I share with them, and I don't send the final file until they've paid the second half of the fee. So it's about thinking about how will you make sure that you're paid for whatever information you're giving them, so that you're not worrying about them taking it and running with it at any particular point.
Okay, that's good information. Let's see, there are some others. Let's see, what if you need to show your client your showroom and want to screen share? A computer is a tough thing to move around. Would they use a tablet? Do you have other recommendations?
Yeah, whenever you're trying to do any kind of a tour, that is definitely when I think a tablet or a phone is your friend. And like I said, the key to that is just getting familiar with that front-facing camera versus the rear-facing camera, so that you can turn the camera around, which not only helps with the audio, which is so essential, but it also helps you because you can watch the screen and you know what you're showing them. Because if you were to plug in like my pink earbuds here, then it really doesn't matter which way my device is facing, but I still, like if I turn my camera away from me, I won't know what I'm showing them. So even if you have an earbud or microphone set that doesn't make the audio go bad, you still want to be able to see what you're showing them. So that's where a tablet or a phone is definitely a good tool.
And someone asked about iPad. I would assume that works the same way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, good. All right, let's see here. You had mentioned something about headphones. Do you think the over-the-ear headsets look professional or too bulky? What would you think about that?
I think this is probably a question of vanity, and I would say I can't do it. They're too bulky for me. I don't even like the earbud that kind of comes around in front of your face, like the call center kind of headset. So yeah, I'm kind of vain, and I prefer something pretty low profile, but I don't think the clients would judge you one way or the other if you're using the larger headphones, and they really can cancel out a lot of noise and give you a great experience.
Good. So one of the things that some people are asking, do you recommend, or suggest, I should say, other types of things besides Zoom? And then they were also asking, like, how do you use the tools? So that was a big thing, like circling things perhaps or whatever on the screen.
Yes. Okay, so in terms of the different platforms, I've played with Skype, Zoom, GoToMeeting, and Google Hangouts. I've not yet tried the new Facebook meeting rooms, I think is what they're calling it. And I really have found them all to be very, very similar for one-to-one meetings. They really only have changed in when I'm going to larger group experiences. And so, for example, one of the things I found when I was getting ready for this conference on WebEx is if I wanted to have my slideshow going, and a lot of designers actually do use PowerPoint or Keynote for their presentation files. I want to share the slides like I'm doing right now. I was not able to go into annotate mode so that I could circle on those slides. So each platform is going to be a little bit different, and you want to practice ahead of time to figure out what you can and cannot do. I do find that it's really important that I can point to what I'm talking about when I'm meeting with my clients virtually. So I usually won't go into the full screen slide share mode unless I'm doing a professional event like this. If I'm working with my clients, I will simply share my desktop so that my mouse is still active. And sometimes I'll even go into my preferences to make my little mouse as big as possible, like ridiculously Mickey Mouse large, so that it's very easy for them to follow along to where I'm pointing.
Okay, let's see. There were some others coming in here. So let's see. Someone's asking, how do you handle designs, i.e., sending in advance? The person says, I don't give plans until we have a contract. So I think you touched on that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I definitely don't give plans until I have a contract. So with my virtual process, I will have I do a free intake call, which is the same thing I do with in person. I prefer to keep my consultations free so that I don't know, I just feel freer to say no to the client, just like they can say no to me. So that's a personal choice. But so I do the same thing with virtual calls. I'll do a free initial virtual consult, which is not a solutions call. I have a solutions call as a separate fee. They can work with me for 30 minutes for $75, which is, by the way, prepaid. So if somebody wants to pick my brain, or they want instant solutions, my in-person solution for that is my quick action session. People prepay that session. I don't show up to somebody's house for solutions if they haven't paid for it. And same thing online. If they want solutions, they will prepay that session in 30-minute increments, and then I will show up and tell them anything they want to know. But when it comes to a larger project, I will do my initial consult for free, because I just consider that a two-way interview. After that, I will put a scope of work together, and all of my projects are flat fee. Some people choose to work hourly. If you're working hourly, then just get a retainer, so same concept. I'll send them a design agreement. They sign it. They pay half up front, and then I get all the measurement files and everything from them. That's a whole topic on its own, getting good measurements from your clients. And then when I present to them, I already have half the money. I feel very good about if they were just to take that half-done presentation file and run with it, I would have been paid well for my time already.
Okay. So there was a comment here about someone using, when we were talking about headsets a minute or two ago, Plantronics Voyager Bluetooth works great. Someone said not obtrusive and can plug into your computer with a little chip, so no wires. So that was just a suggestion. Let's see here. So you answered the question about what you charge for virtual meetings and arrange, so that was good. Let's see. Someone was saying when you were talking much earlier about like, oh, this is not how you show someone, the curtains and what they're going to look like or that type of thing. So in response to that, someone said that you should pretend that a person is blind so that do you have any other comments about, how to really like help with measurements and things like that? I've had some questions in here about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think that's really, really brilliant. Like if you had to tell somebody where to go and how to move if they couldn't see, that's going to help you get your head around how to use your words effectively, and practice on your family. Blindfold your kid and try and walk them around a room or something. When it comes to the measurements, this is one of the biggest bugaboos for virtual design. That's one of the reasons I wanted to share this second link on the screen, on the slide you're seeing right now. I created a how to measure video that does two things. One is just showing my hands, and it has my voice, and I am hand sketching in real time a room, and then I'm sketching the overall dimensions and the wall to window, window width, end of window to wall dimensions, and I'm talking through the dimensions I'm going to need from the client in real time while sketching it, so that I can show them a couple of things. I'm showing them it doesn't have to be to scale. I'm showing them that it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm showing them what I do need, and I need these very specific measurements. And then I also, while showing that document, talk about the vertical measurements, which is the thing that I find most clients miss: the window sill heights, the window heights, the ceiling heights. So you can see that video on that link on my blog, and then you can also see the video where I just did a real-time measuring of the room that I'm in right now, my home office, where I just said, here's how I do this. And I showed I have a real-life tape measure, or a normal tape measure, and then I have my laser tape measure, because a lot of clients don't know about laser measurers, which are the best. I love them. So showing some of the good tools for the clients so that they can be more effective themselves. And then I have a big whiteboard in that video. So I was showing them how I'm measuring, and then I'm recording. And so trying to, in a very easy to share way, show your clients what you need so that you don't have a ton of emails back and forth. A video, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So check out how I did that with those two videos. Be prepared to have a little bit of going back and forth. And then it goes back to the thing I said about setting the rules, right? So you don't, first of all, you don't have to provide perfectly scaled plans. And honestly, if your clients are providing the measurements, you're going to need to put a big old stamp on your documents anyway that says all measurements were client provided. All measurements are subject to field verification. It should be in your design agreement that you're relying on the client measurements and you take no responsibility or liability for those measurements being wrong, as long as you put on your file what they gave you. So those are two parts, right? Find a way to get the information as efficiently and effectively as possible, and cover your bases saying, I didn't take these measurements, by the way. Then with regards to setting your own rules, there are rooms that are hard to measure. Some attic spaces or rooms that have really crazy ceiling situations, even as a designer, they can be really, really hard to measure. And you can just say, I'd love to do a virtual meeting with you on this. Here's what I can provide you, and here's what I can't provide you because I don't feel confident giving you a good product. Don't put yourself in a situation where you don't feel you can provide them of the product that is going to be useful and beneficial.
Thank you. So let's see. There's many questions, quite honestly, as I'm sure you can imagine, and people are asking things from what's an appropriate flat fee all the way to something like let me just look at this for a second here. Something about separate fees for virtual meetings versus scope of work, et cetera. Do you actually break those out?
So really good questions. For me, let me see, how do I answer that? In my practice, we don't do any project execution, which makes us kind of nicely suited for virtual design because we were never trying to execute projects in real life. So so the fact that we're not executing projects in virtual life is a nice flow. So our process is very contained. I do a design agreement that maps out the scope, and I don't charge for that, but I've worked the time. I know how long it takes me to put a design agreement together. It takes me about an hour. So my fees, as a business owner, my hourly fees that I'm using to make my flat fee, ideally incorporate the time I'm going to need to do my scope of work, my initial consult meeting, et cetera, right? Any follow-up that I plan to do that isn't technically part of the design project process. So in my case, I do it as one flat fee that is going to cover you send me the measurements portion, here's your design goals portion, here's your presentation of your design, here's the compiled, reshopped design, here's your final file. For me, that is all one fee. And I've been able to, I've been at this for 13 years, so I really have a good sense of how long things are going to take me. It doesn't mean I always estimate right. If you're thinking about going to a flat fee, there are going to be plenty of times when you underestimate, either because you really wanted the client or you felt bad for them or whatever, and you eat it, right? You're not going to go back on your flat fee that you promised somebody if they didn't change the scope of work. But what you want to do is, over time, get more and more efficient so your fee stays the same, but it takes you less time and you're actually making more per hour. So that was kind of a convoluted answer to should the fees be parsed out, but the answer really is it depends on your structure and your client flow and how far you want to take the client with each chunk of money. If you feel like you need to work with the client for phase A before you know how long phase B will take and therefore can assign a price to it, then that's what you got to do.
Okay. So there was a couple of questions here about, once again, working with tools and how does somebody take notes while they're doing a virtual meeting? How does someone actually, the take notes was a big thing. And then, of course, the tools, the pointers, all those things. I think those, maybe you could just talk to the fact that each and every, not only Zoom, but other ones have different types of tools that can be worked with.
They do. And I don't use any of the tools. The only thing I do is I turn on my screen, I have my virtual meeting, and I'm screen sharing. So I'm not, like right now, I'm within my keynote presentation, so you can't see my mouse if I move it around. But when I'm having a virtual meeting with my clients, what I do is I make sure that any extra apps that I might be using on my computer, any extra programs are closed, because also I don't want my computer working extra hard while I'm on a virtual meeting. But I also don't want to oops and open the wrong file, right? So I want to make sure that before I have my meeting, all the files I want to access are already open, so I'm not awkwardly waiting for the file to open during my meeting. I don't have anything extra open. And then with Zoom and a lot of the platforms, when you go to share your screen, you can share just one program, like just your Word document, or you can share your entire desktop. I like to share my entire desktop because I will frequently be going back and forth between my layout program and my design file, which for me is Home Designer for my layout program, and then my layout or my design file is in Pages because I'm a Mac user. So I want to be able to go back and forth between those, and maybe also a Chrome link if I'm doing some online shopping. So sharing my screen lets me go from program to program without having to reshare. And that means that my mouse is active, so I can literally point at things with my mouse, and it means my keyboard's active, and I can just type on the file. My files are always live while I'm doing a virtual meeting, and I'm changing them and affecting them during our meeting, not the virtual consults, but during a presentation file, I'm literally actively changing and taking notes on the file. What I'll do is I'll grab a shape sometimes, like a big, circle shape, and put it on my Pages file, and I'll put a note in it like, find a new sconce, or check this measurement, or whatever note I need to take. So I tend to take my notes right on my Pages file, which also should work in Word if you're working there, or PowerPoint, whatever you're using. And of course, you can also take some handwritten notes on paper while you're having your meeting. And then the third part is I do record all of my client meetings and all of my coaching meetings. And usually I will, right afterwards, delete it. I'm like, there's nothing I said that I need. But when I'm having an initial consult, it's great if it's an hour-long conversation and they gave me a lot of specifics about what they want for their space, or they walked me through their space, I can review it while I'm writing my design agreement. It's awesome. And then with my coaching meetings, it's especially important because frequently I'll be talking about, oh, what if you just said it like this? Or what if you redid your copy on your homepage to say this? And when you say something amazing in the moment with your client, and then they go, wait, oh, that was great. What did you just say? You're like, I have no idea what I just said. Like it just came out of my mouth. So if you had that recording, you can literally send it to them, and you've got that nugget exactly as it was in the magic moment that it happened.
That's a great idea, to be very cognizant about what's being recorded. And I find it interesting that you don't necessarily save them. So, I know that some of these platforms, at least the one that we're working in right now, definitely saves recordings. There is storage space involved with this. So I don't know if you have any recommendations about, because I heard you say you don't necessarily keep them, but I'm thinking that some people would want to go back to them perhaps for a variety of reasons, meaning you as the designer.
Absolutely. And I actually always keep my virtual, my initial meetings, my initial consults. I always keep those because I actually find that my team and I refer back to them quite a few times, not just while writing the agreement, but also if I have several team members working on the same project and they weren't able to attend the first meeting, it's like they're attending the first meeting. They can really go back to the original intent behind the design. So I always save my initial consults, and I always save my coaching meetings because there is so much talk about how to phrase something or how to write something. But I don't tend to save the presentation meetings unless, or after once I've moved on from that phase of the design. I personally don't find it useful or a useful use of storage. A lot of it comes down to how much storage do you have and where are you storing that? So if you want to pay for extra storage on the cloud, or if your device has enough storage that you can save those recordings, save everything. Paper trails are fantastic, including digital ones. But, you have to figure out if you have storage limitations and what you want to save.
That was a great answer to that. Thank you. So a lot of people have been putting notes in here, questions, I should say, about how do you get people to either pay up front? What do you recommend? Are we using credit cards? I mean, what type of systems do you usually use to get payments in advance if you need to?
Oh yeah. Well, so the first answer is a lot of people are afraid to ask for money up front, and so it's going to come first from a place of confidence and you just asking, because our clients, we train our clients, and whatever we normalize, most of them won't put up a fuss about it. Um, so that's the first step. Are you confident in asking for the money? Because if you're not, you're going to have a heck of a time getting it. And then the second part, at least in my company, what we do is we use, on the design side, we use PayPal. So we will send people a PayPal invoice, and then they pay through PayPal. Yes, PayPal takes about 3% of our money. Again, I build that into how I charge. I don't try and nickel and dime my clients. I don't say, if you pay me by check or Venmo, it'll be this much, and if you pay me by credit card, it'll be this much, because I don't consider that a professional practice, and I want to be a professional practice. So I build it into the cost. By allowing my clients to pay by credit card, they pay faster, they get miles, it's super easy. I don't have to chase people for money. And then on my coaching side, I do it very similarly, except for it's slightly different, because on the coaching side, I actually allow people to book their own sessions through Acuity. And Acuity you can set it up so that when somebody books a session with you, they also pay for that session. And on Acuity, I have them paying through Square. So I use Square on my coaching side. I use PayPal for my design side. They prepay through the calendar for my coaching side, which is so amazing. I mean, automation, when you can use it, use it. And on the design side, they pay through PayPal. Over time, I might be able to make that more automated too. The reason we haven't automated that on the design side is because so many of our meetings in the past have been in person, that I need my scheduler really needs to be able to balance out when I'm driving where, and I don't need clients saying, oh yeah, I just want to show up at this time, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to be in front of a computer in time. But if all you're doing is virtual meetings, then consider letting them self-schedule and then using a system like Acuity where they can also pay up front for some of those shorter meetings and use an invoicing system like PayPal for those bigger invoices.
Okay, that's good to know. I know there are lots of them out there, and some people are saying, about e-transfer and some other ones out there. So I think it's really just a matter of, I mean, I, as an example, have my own PayPal account. I've used that for years. But
yeah, and the key is make sure that they're paying you as a business, especially if you're an LLC or an S corp. Make sure they're not paying you into some you the human account. Mm-hmm. Because you're trying to save some fees. That will all that liability you're trying to limit with your limited liability company, you will be destroying that barrier between those two things. And if you were ever sued, you could be opening yourself up to being sued in your personal finances, not just your business finances.
Good point. Thank you, Rebecca. So we talked a little bit about the different, how to screen share drawings and take measurements, but we haven't talked about like working with color swatches with clients and things like that. Any advice on that?
Yeah, and I was a little nervous about that because until coronavirus, I had not done any virtual color consults. I was a little nervous, but I've had a really effective time doing it. So what I do is I make sure that the lighting on my side is as fantastic as possible. I have all of my Benjamin Moore swatches right next to me, and I will just literally hold them up in front of the camera. And what I'll do is I'll take a white piece of paper and I'll put it next to the color, which gives a bit of a reference for the client, like, hey, you should be seeing a white piece of paper next to this, and if it looks super yellow or something, know that the color you're seeing from me is totally not what I'm trying to show you. So using some references can really help. Using larger swatches than smaller swatches can help, and then sending swatches to them. So maybe you do a virtual consult to get a sense of what you think will work well for them, and then you, through Material Bank or however you want to do it, you send them swatches so they can see them in person. And then you could even swap the story. And once they have those swatches in their house, you could have them hold them up in their house and in their lighting so that you can give your best advice as well. It won't be perfect. It is definitely a limitation, but those are some things to make it work.
Okay, so a couple other questions before we run out of time. I'm not sure how long you can stay, but there's so many questions. And I'm trying to get to them all, and I apologize in advance if I can't. So here's one about how do you send large files to a homeowner? Are you doing that virtually or in another means?
That's a really great question, and that really will depend again on your system. So a lot of email platforms will limit the size of a file that you can send, but if you, like we're on G Suite, and so if I try and send a file by email that's too large, it'll do it as a, gosh, I can't even remember the name of it, but it'll make it a link instead of the actual file, and that happens automatically. But platforms like Dropbox are exactly, that's what they're made for. So use a platform like Dropbox if you are really needing to send a lot of larger files. And then the other thing is, if you have a lot of images in your file, at least on Pages, we are able to push a little button that says reduce file size. So the files may be way bigger than they need to be. And in Pages, you can literally push a button that says reduce file size. You have to be a little careful because it will reduce the quality of those images. And on some of our line drawings, sometimes the lines will disappear. Sometimes the pictures will get pixelated. So you need to get to know your tools. But there are various ways to shrink a file, and there are various ways to share a file, depending on your system.
Okay, and just to note, I use WeTransfer.com. It's real easy. It takes up to 2 gig. That's for the free version.
Perfect.
Just I mentioned that. So someone is asking about how do you effectively market your e-design service? I know that's a big question.
It is a big question. And it also comes back to how you're going to price, right? So you need to give some thought to, A, what are you going to provide? So are you going to just do virtual consults and let people pick your brain? Are you going to do full-on kitchen remodel designs? So what are you actually providing? And who else is providing it? Compare yourself to our colleagues. See what other people are providing and see what you can provide that's a little bit different. Set yourself apart from your colleagues, because the thing about this virtual world is now my colleagues are people in Florida and Massachusetts. And if I'm going to do virtual design, I've got to think about what they're marketing versus what I'm marketing to. And that can be a little terrifying. So first of all, figure out what you're going to provide, and then figure out how you're going to price it. And then it's like any marketing. Okay, where are your people based on those two things that you just decided? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Are they on mom Facebook groups? And now it's too big of a question. I can't answer the whole question because it's a really big question.
I know it is. It really is. But thank you for trying. So I just wanted to ask you. Someone's asking about, since everyone's at home and spending more time, obviously at home, how are you managing the flow of clients? I mean, obviously this is a good problem to have, but how would you recommend doing that?
Okay. Well, first of all, whoever wrote that, I want to get on Zoom with you and drink wine and commiserate, because I thought I was going to have a bunch of free time while I was doing all this stuff, and I have not had free time. I feel, that's why I said earlier, I have a Zoom coma, and it's hard because if you're blessed with having a lot of work right now, either because you're improving your systems and learning new systems, having meetings, doing marketing. We've been doing free design helplines for our clients, so I wanted to keep my team busy with hours, and so I offered free meetings. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so hard because in real life, you get up and you drive to somebody's house, and that's a break, even though you didn't realize it. It's a break to breathe and touch up your lipstick and listen to a podcast and just zone out for a minute. And when you're just sitting at your desk at home, you have to very intentionally manage your energy and manage your time. Honestly, part of the reason I am so well hydrated is because I want to keep a bottle of water at my desk to keep hydrated, but also because it forces me to take bathroom breaks. Otherwise, I'll sit here for 6 hours and not realize I haven't gotten up. And that's so bad for our bodies and our mental health. And we're not going to do our best work for our clients. So you've got to set boundaries. Maybe you only meet with people in the mornings. Maybe you only work from 10 to 4. Maybe you have a timer on your phone that goes off every hour to remind you to get up and stretch. But you definitely need to be intentional about your physical and mental health while working from home.
Okay, that's great information. And just one more I wanted to ask, because I thought this was a really good question. How long did it take you to feel comfortable with meeting apps, and how did you train yourself
Well,
to do this?
yeah. Um, I mean, with each app, I get nervous again. You guys, I practiced a lot for this meeting because I was like, WebEx, oh no, I'm not used to it. So, get on the app with a family member or a friend, somebody kind, and practice. That's the number one answer. And then that video I shared from Bobby, it's so great talking about camera angles and lighting. Like there are so many resources on YouTube right now because everybody's going through this, talking about how to look your best, how to feel your best, how to present your best. So, do some research. And then also just give yourself some grace because, okay, if you haven't seen some of the fantastic parody songs about Zoom meetings, they're hilarious. I have a favorite one, and if you email me for any of the other things, ask me about that. I will send you that link. You will laugh your pants off. Remember that we are all going through this. We are all going to have Zoom bombs. We are all going to have moments where something stupid happens. I was being interviewed the other day, video interviewed the other day, and my delightful husband decided that was the moment. He wanted to come in and ask me what I wanted for dinner. So loving, and I'm like, not right now. And then after the interview was over, I'm like, did you see me? Like I was making the, cut it off symbol with my neck, and I was so embarrassed. And then she was just laughing. She's like, yeah, it was no big deal. Everybody knows we're all trying to figure this out. So just know that these are all best practices. Employ them as much as you can, but don't sweat the little things, and know that we know we're all human, especially now.
That's really great information. And I just wanted to ask you, Ray, if you could send me the tip sheet that you talked about earlier. I'd like to send that out when I send the recording, if that's
Absolutely.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're over time. But someone was asking for part two. So I know that you and I were speaking about that. So we'll certainly chat. But
yeah, and I'd love if we want to do a part two. It can actually be a recap of this, and I can talk slower. But I'm glad we all had all the time for questions, so I guess it worked out. But also, if there are certain things people would want me to cover, it would be great to have that information because I'm happy to tailor it to the questions that are top of mind for people.
Okay, and so I'm glad that you brought that up. So those questions, would they be sent, if we do decide to do a second part two or however that looks, should they send them to you, Rebecca, at seriouslyhappy.com?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I can compile them, and then you and I can talk about how and when to launch part two.
Great, great. Well, Rebecca, I really want to thank you so much for your time, and to all of you out there for being with us today. And I wish you very successful meetings.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.